where we invite our resident analyst, Mighti Jamie, to talk to us through some of the stories highlighted earlier, as well as throw forward to the week ahead. Good morning, Jamie. How are you on this Monday?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm very well, and good morning to the listeners and viewers.
Great. Always great having time to catch up with you. Thank you always for making that time. And today, with our roundup wrap, we start with the UN Human Rights Office. They're saying the Rwandan backed M23 rebels, the Congolese armed forces, and other armed groups have committed serious human rights violations in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, some potentially amounting to war crimes. What can you tell us here?
Well, it was interesting that they implicated both sides of this particular conflict as it has unfolded, because the report found that the Tutsi-led M23 carried out summary executions, torture, and enforced disappearances, which may amount to crimes against humanity, as well as war crimes, including willful killing and the taking of hostages. So that's what they found about M23. They also said that the DRC armed forces and some groups that it's been working with or that have been implicated as working with them, such as the Wazalendo, had committed grave violations, including gang rape, the deliberate killing of civilians, and looting. If you then consider these type of findings or preliminary findings, if you will, it does indicate that this war is not being fought in line with the rules of war, and that both sides, and it's not great ever to say both sides are doing something wrong, because it seems as if you're picking one over the other or trying to deflate the situation to the benefit of the other in terms of creating equivocation or false equivalence. But this report does say in this conflict, it seems as if there is no respect for the rules of law of war, and that both entities now have violated. So obviously, the harsher, assessment will be on the M23, because they're the ones basically waging a war in a recognized nation, and are backed by outside nations and creating instability. But in terms of how does this have impact on peace going forward,
Mm.
it will likely affect prospects for peace, because this will likely create more resentment and animosity. If you recall, when Kagame acknowledged that he was supporting at some point the 23 M23 movement, he said he was doing so because the Tutsi community living inside of the DRC was being marginalized and attacked by the government of the DRC. If these allegations hold up, the actions of the DRC armed forces will then give people like him an argument to continue supporting the Tutsi group. But on the side of the DRC government, which is now trying to prosecute in absentia, Kabila, and also trying to, make ways and make a path towards regaining control of the region, they're going to use these type of findings as grounds to continue trying to fight with M23. So that dissolves, I think, a path to peace. A lot of global players and actors and regional actors have been saying that they are, focused on creating peace in the region. This report suggests that it's going to be more difficult even than they anticipated. I mean, we just had a peace and security dialogue in South Africa, where the M23 was invited by Thabo Mbeki, and they were also trying to, give some legitimacy to the group, talk to the group. The government of the DRC was supposed to attend. They ended up pulling out, and instead of attending the peace and security conference, they then commemorated soldiers who had been who lost their lives in the eastern parts of the DRC, and we saw Chisekedi was there. So Chisekedi, as the president, was sending a message to the African community that is involved in trying to keep peace in the region, that he is aggrieved by the loss of his soldiers, aggrieved by the loss of the territory. And as you saw, the M23 was in the ground in South Africa which also led to its own questions around what are they doing there. But if you then consider that those dynamics, Thabo Mbeki is somebody with a lot of stature, a lot of experience in trying to mediate these type of peace talks, he also bumped into a roadblock because effectively he was rebuffed by the government of DRC at this particular point. They view him to be closer to Kabila and not necessarily to Tshisekedi.
Mm.
So I don't think we're anywhere closer to seeing peace in this particular country. I think this report shows us what is going on. If we're thinking about the people on the ground, there's no justification that we can extend whatsoever for all of the crimes against humanity which have been outlined here on both sides: summary executions, torture, enforced disappearances, gang rape, deliberate killing of civilians, looting. And this is being reported on both entities at both sides of the conflict. And I think what we are then ascertaining is that the people of the DRC are suffering. The UN, the African Union rather, once had a conference which was titled "End of Silencing the Guns." I think when Ramaphosa was the chairperson, and I think we are so far from the silencing of the guns right now. It's actually another indictment on the African Union that 5 or 6 years after they had that particular theme as part of the AU conference, we are nowhere closer to the silencing of the guns, and in fact they're getting louder because we still have the situation in Sudan as well, which is an ongoing conflict.
Let's go to Guinea-Bissau for a bit. President Umaro Sikoko Embalo remaining in office in that country despite his term officially expiring last week. What do you make of this move?
Well, it looks as if Mbalo is not going anywhere. I mean, they have an election which is coming up on the 23rd of November.
Mm.
Just to put some context out there, it's a very small country, Guinea-Bissau, 2 million people, but the corruption levels in the country are some of the highest in the world. I think they rank number 168 in terms of corruption. This year, earlier, when his term actually officially ended in February, he was supposed to, I think, vacate the office, and then we have this period where the elections happen, under, basically a skeleton government. Some countries do it differently. We saw how the UK did it, France did it, the US did it. They all do it in different ways, and African countries haven't actually managed how to do transition. But in that case, the court ruled in his favor and said he could stay in office up until September. And now he's supposed to have stepped aside. He said, no, I'm going to continue, my duties. And people are now saying that this is a constitutional crisis, and actually it's going to lead to capture, for instance, of the office of the presidency. But aside from that, we've already seen some moves which suggest that Mbalo is not necessarily interested in going anywhere. He fired his prime minister and one of his biggest political rivals last month. ECOWAS tried to go into the country to negotiate, electoral issues, and this particular dispute of the firing of the prime minister. They were threatened with expulsion. They then left the country. We've seen that the parliament basically has not been functioning since 2023. So if you consider all of those factors together, the firing of the prime minister, the expulsion of ECOWAS, the continuation of his stay in office post, the official end of the term, we don't necessarily see here somebody who's gearing up to leave, and he still has a second term in terms of the constitution. So he is, if he were to win the election, which it looks likely that he will, quote unquote, win the election in this context, then I think this is where things stand right now. So the country may very well continue to have some political stability if he has the support of the military, and if he continues to make sure that that side of the equation is not, disgruntled. What we typically see in dictatorial countries is that as long as the leader has the backing and the support of the military, the coup is not likely. They have had a history of coups, in their 50, I think they've been independent for 52 years or so, and from Portugal. And in that period of time, Guinea-Bissau has had a plethora of coups. It has had a plethora of disruptions, and as a result of that, there are genuine concerns about what this will do for the country. But I think its problems extend beyond the existence of Mbalo, the corruption in the country, the poverty levels in the country. It's a relatively young country, so young people are basically being exploited by, these political leaders for their own ends. And I don't think that will stop now, whether it's Mbalo or even somebody else. But
Are there any
It looks as
opposition
if the Embalo
voices
show is
that I have said anything, and what are they calling for in this power grab?
look, they're calling for him to not be in the presidential office and not to interfere, for instance, with the election. So opposition groups in dictatorial countries like this, they are vocal, and we, the media, give them the attention that they deserve. And they're making the right arguments. He's supposed to have vacated the office. It's not supposed to, in their context, to have somebody sitting in, because they can abuse the system if they lose the election, if it's a free and fair election. So their argument is sound. Unfortunately, they don't have power and they don't have authority. I mean, already in February, we saw the court ruling in favor of Mbalo. I've not read the judgment. I cannot ascertain whether it was, a manipulated judgment. But in dictatorships, which this basically is coming out to be, you as the opposition, you're basically doing your very best to try to create some small movement towards more democracy. But the reality is the power rests in the presidency and in the army,
Mm.
and Mbalo seems to have that support. We'll see as we get closer to elections, but they've definitely objected to this. They've called it an illegal power grab. As to whether they will have recourse, typically in Africa, people stay out of it.
Yeah. South Sudan now, let's talk about that country. They've repatriated a Mexican national who was deported from the United States in July, and this is according to the Foreign Ministry. So the country is taking a different move to those that we've seen in Eswatini and Rwanda recently.
Yes and no. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to tell you why I'm saying yes and no. So, in the first instance, I think that this has already achieved what the Americans wanted it to achieve. Because when we heard, there's the Kilmar guy as well, who was taken and was sent to Ecuador or something like that, where to those prisons. He's now back in America. I'm just juxtaposing those for a reason which I'll explain now.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Trump administration philosophy on dealing with immigration is to create fear amongst those who would potentially make the trip or try to get into America. So at the point at which, this Mexican was sent all the way from Mexico to South Sudan, and South Sudan is not a very great country by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there's conflict, there's underdevelopment, there's a lot going on there. And it's, Eswatini and other options, actually, Rwanda is etc., are much better in terms of where you could be sent as somebody who's deported. So the whole agenda of the American administration has to be everybody has to be scared that they're going to be sent to Ecuador or they're going to be sent to, South Sudan. And at the point at which he gets returned, I think it's because of the legal implications for the Trump administration. So they've repatriated this gentleman back to Mexico because it would not necessarily work to continue to have him in a country such as South Sudan, because Trump is getting some pushback on the humanitarian conditions of his ICE department, which has been dealing with a lot of these, abductions and deportations, if you will. But the message has already been sent. So clearly they took the money and the message has now been sent. Even Kilmer is back in. So I think that the Trump administration may very well be happy with the fact that they've already made an example out of somebody. I don't think that they fully intended to keep sending people to all of these African nations. And, we have seen a difference in that Eswatini has embraced it a lot more. And we've also seen Lesotho defending it, saying that they've got robust prisons, etc. Obviously, everybody got financial incentives to do the program. But I actually think that the Americans in this respect have achieved what they wanted to achieve. And at the bigger picture level, there is a conversation we need to have about Europe and America, basically the West, trying to renegotiate the international immigration law order. And the argument seems to be now that if you are seeking refuge, Do so in Africa. Do so in your neighborhood. Do so wherever. We don't want you people anymore in the West. We don't want you people coming here with your different cultures, your different identities, your different religions, and joining us here because you will then become problems to our society. At a moral level, I always take exception to the West making this point because the mess in Africa was a result of the actions of the United Kingdom, France, Portugal. These countries have created the havoc which they are now creating fences to try to prevent. We've even seen Nigel Farage making the same arguments, Meloni in Italy making the same arguments, trying the same tactics. It looks as if there's a coordinated effort to de facto stop this type of immigration law, and that's a problem that we have to tackle. And I think, Juba is an interesting example of developments there, but we should all be concerned as a global community about this renegotiation.
All right, we're going to leave it there for today because we're out of time. But thank you so much again for your time, Mighty.
Pleasure. Have a good one.
You have a great day and a great start to your week.
Thank you.
That's our resident analyst, Mighti Jamie, catching us up on some news stories highlighted earlier, as well as throwing forward to what we can expect to develop in the space of news in this new week. It's 6:30 Central African time. Let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi. She's got our news headlines.
SABC News.